So a market participant, meaning somebody like EA or Epic Games, based on my understanding, has sent in a letter to the CMA, and the CMA has actually published it in full. And this letter seems to be supportive of the Microsoft acquisition of Activision Blizzard. It's interesting that the CMA would publish this. Let's dive into what this individual or corporate entity said. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell to know when I do the next video about the Activision Blizzard merger, which is probably every day around 7. So this is the market participant letter, and I've highlighted some of the key moments, but largely it seems like this person is okay with the merger. They say, we also hope that you will engage attentively with experts in the video game industry, given that the benefits that the inquiry panel would likely receive from furthering their understanding of this dynamic market. It seems throughout the letter, they kind of seem like they're telling the CMA, hey, we like what you do. We think you don't quite have a grasp on the video game industry, so we're glad you're putting this call out to hear from more people, and here's what we think. We believe the CMA should use its power to help shape this dynamic industry as it evolves and provide a mandate for the Digital Markets Unit to be at the forefront of regulation as we move to an increasingly digitized world. Our view is that this transaction is inherently positive for consumers and that it will result in more choice at lower prices without compromising quality versus the current status quo. And it's throughout this letter, I'm like, did I write this? Like, it's a lot of the points that I talk about in these videos, how I like the competitive nature of where the industry is at. I think this is going to push Sony in the right direction towards how they compete. And with the news yesterday about the fact that Xbox apparently offered PlayStation the option of having Call of Duty on PlayStation Plus, I mean, it's a very interesting timing with the letter. Anyway, continuing on. They talk about breaking their submission into 5 sections. And 2 I want to focus on are increasing digitization of the video game industry moving forwards is inherently positive, discussing that the video game market is moving towards a subscription and cloud-based gaming model, how this transaction does not negatively impact the future of cloud gaming, and how it will stimulate innovation and competition in this market moving forwards. And what they're basically saying is we think this is a positive thing, and we're going to outline why we think it is positive in these respects. And there's a lot of stuff in here like choice in these markets is pro-consumer. It's all very positive towards allowing the deal to happen. The proposed transaction is inherently pro-consumer, analyzing how this transaction brings many benefits to consumers, most notably by providing wider access to quality content at a low cost, and why Microsoft has no incentive to pursue a strategy of input foreclosure towards rivals. As I've outlined on this channel, Microsoft stands to make way too much money from this deal to shut down the competition. Basically, they don't have to do much. They just have to continue to allow PlayStation to exist. Not that they could ever shut down PlayStation. But as long as PlayStation exists, they get like $1 billion a year for them. If you ask me, hey, your competition will still exist, but they're going to give you a ton of money every year. Is that okay with you? Yeah. That sounds pretty good to me. Continuing on. Increased digitization that results in greater choice and innovation is welcome. The point I focus on in this paragraph is ultimately digitization is likely to continue as consumers become more accustomed to subscription and cloud-based platforms, with result in wider choice at accessible prices, stimulating innovation and competition. Look, I know a lot of you out there like your physical copies of games, but a lot of games don't come on the disc anymore, and whether or not that's a positive thing, I think is a separate topic. I think there has been very clear pictures painted about just how many people have moved to digital. It happened a few years back, actually, where digital much eclipsed the revenue of physical copies of media, right? So for them to say that, hey, this is the way of the future, so get with the times, isn't that far off the mark, in my opinion, because I do think we are moving towards digital. And whether or not you personally like that, I think is up to you. For me personally, I'm totally fine with digital. I don't mind subscribing to a service. I actually really like subscribing to a service because for most games, I don't feel like I need that physical ownership aspect. It would have to be a very special game to me for me to want to own it forever in its physical form. And the way that it works these days is you insert that disc and guess what? It downloads the digital copy of it anyway, and the disc sort of just works like your unlock key. Anyway, continuing on. There is also a clear parallel between the adoption of subscription service platforms within the video game and increasing uptake of subscription platforms more generally in the content streaming market. Disney Plus, including Hulu and ESPN Plus, was able to achieve the same level of subscribers as Netflix within 3 years of launch, despite Netflix being the clear market leader at the time. Customers want choice. Disney was able to launch and compete with Netflix, and now Netflix has to figure out new ways to sweeten the pot, and that means more shows, fighting to purchase things that are going to get more people to subscribe to Netflix, just having different types of products from Disney. Now, Disney has its own thing. There's Paramount. There's all these options out there on the market right now. So this idea that nobody could ever compete in the gaming market, I think it's false. I don't think that's true. And I love having the option of PlayStation Plus or PlayStation products or the option of Xbox products. And as customers and consumers, you get to say, well, do I like Game Pass enough to subscribe to a console, or do I want to get Xbox Game Pass Ultimate and play on my PC and then buy a PlayStation? There's a lot of options there, and I like a lot of options for consumers personally. And it seems like this, whoever it is, market participant does also. This is inherently positive as it provides consumers with more options to consume content, stimulates innovation to produce quality content, and ensures such content is offered at accessible prices. Absolutely true, because like if your opponent or competitor is offering a subscription service with day one releases at a higher price point, what are you going to bring to the table, right? What is your offering going to be, and how are you going to diversify and differentiate yourself from them in some capacity? Again, the parallel to multi-game subscriptions such as Game Pass or PlayStation Plus is clear to see with the low-cost subscription option offering a more accessible alternative to outright game purchases for customers. They continue on. Digital ecosystems relying on platforms provided content are pro-consumer. And the point that they make throughout this whole paragraph is basically like there was a bunch of other stuff that happened in the UK, and none of the points they're making are more prevalent than the increase in choice and low cost, meaning things like Uber, and they mentioned like Airbnb and Deliveroo. Those created a whole new market for people, and there were restaurant services where people could actually deliver products. And this idea of things changing being bad isn't necessarily true. We've seen the world change how we hail a taxi, right? We use Uber or Lyft most of the time in the United States in a lot of places, or whatever rideshare program you have in your local area. That's just something that's evolved over time for the better, and I think gaming is kind of going through that right now. There are, of course, pitfalls to each of these options that need to be regulated and managed, particularly on the power these platforms may have over their suppliers. But fundamentally, these digital solutions have been hugely positive developments for consumers. And that's the concern for the CMA, right? Their main concern is, are you going to degrade the quality of the product? There's no incentive to really do that, because then your customers or consumers aren't going to purchase your service if all of your games stink, right? Like when you get one of those cheap knockoff video game console things, people don't buy those because they're garbage, basically, right? Or you buy them as a joke. Very rarely do people buy them because they think it's real. In the same way, like you're not going to degrade all of your products because your customers are going to be like, well, this is bad. And once that gets out there, you have to do something to maintain your business. As already mentioned, there are a number of regulators in the UK set up to monitor unfair business practices, with the Groceries Code Adjudicator being one such example of a regulator that we believe has helped suppliers manage managing inherent conflicts and ensure they are sufficiently protected from unfair practices by the large food retailers in the UK. So they're saying, hey, your concerns, there's already a branch that deals with that. So this purchase might be one concern, and then there's a separate concern about fairness. And I'm sort of interested with Sony's changes if that gets a flag for them or not. Anyway, we believe it is important the CMA considers these types of ecosystems that are being created when evaluating whether these are positive or negative for consumers. The examples mentioned are part of ecosystems that are reliant on content provided by the platform itself. These tend to be pro-competitive with low barriers for disruption and are beneficial to customers in the ways described. For example, like if you subscribe to PlayStation Plus, right? That's great. You get access to games like Stray on day one. You get free games on PlayStation Plus, just the base one. Every month you have a few free or low-cost games. That's wonderful. And Xbox has their version with Xbox Game Pass. And people look and evaluate those two products and say, well, I like this one more or I like this one more. And I think that is a good thing. Increased digitization of the video game industry moving forward is inherently positive, and it's inevitable, let's be honest. Given the CMA's role in championing consumer benefits, it should use this transaction as an opportunity towards facilitating the transaction towards cloud gaming, which is where the future of video games is headed to. And it is, honestly. I think in the future we will be doing more and more in the cloud. And from this point, they really get in the weeds. So I'm going to try and go through this as quickly as possible because they make a lot of points. While concerns have been raised by Sony in particular, ultimately the CMA's priority is in protecting consumers and not to preserve the status quo of competitors. I find it very interesting that they point that out because Sony is the main person who is against this. And what do they have to stand to gain if this deal falls apart? A whole lot. The idea that Sony having to compete is a bad thing, or Sony makes wonderful games, right? And they have their own strategy. And Xbox has a lot of money, so Xbox is buying more things. It's two different approaches to the situation, but there is nothing to indicate that Sony goes away or Microsoft goes away if this deal falls apart. So there's not really a compelling reason for the deal not to go through, at least in my opinion. This industry is far from static and one that frequently has new entrants that have the ability to quickly capture market share, such as what happened with Fortnite. And I bring that up a lot in my videos. They're like, there's no way anything could ever compete with Call of Duty. Fortnite entered the scene out of nowhere and it absolutely dominated the market. It's still one of the biggest games to date. Apex came on the scene, did the same thing. So this idea that nothing could ever compete with Call of Duty is just nonsense. It is understandable that Sony is seeking to maintain its position, given that it invested a lot of capital, time, and energy towards creating this. However, the landscape is changing given the wide adoption of subscription-based services and cloud-based platforms in other industries. These have reduced the barriers to entry, and such innovation has allowed consumers to have new methods to pay for content, along with having access to a wider range of content without sacrificing quality. If you look at PlayStation Plus, do you feel like any of those games have been degraded in quality? Like I believe Death Stranding came to PlayStation Plus not that long ago. They actually came out with Death Stranding Director's Cut later on and improved the quality of that game. And then the PC version came out. The original God of War, do you feel like that was degraded because it came to PlayStation Plus? Inversely, releasing something day and date is a choice, right? So the fact that Xbox does it, there's nothing to indicate that there would be a degradation of quality. You have to prove that, and I don't think anybody can. Increased competition promotes innovation and greater content quality for consumers. And that's what this deal is all about. It's about customers. It's about you and me, about people that want to buy stuff. And that's what the CMA should be focusing on, not protecting Sony, right? Protecting Sony to a point. Like if Xbox was making it so nobody could ever release anything on Sony, but there's a 10-year contract for Call of Duty on the table. So we believe Microsoft is seeking to propagate innovation and embrace the move towards subscription services and cloud gaming. I believe that's very true. It is unsurprising that a technology company can see where the direction of travel is headed. By contrast, it seems that Sony may be looking at this transaction through the lens of a hardware company and not with the future development of the industry in mind. They said it. I feel like a lot of this is points that I've made in the past. Sony went the old school route, right? Microsoft is forging a new path because they were forced to. Sony wants to maintain the status quo, but guess what? The world is moving on and moving towards new things, whether you like it or not. And Sony has really had to figure out how to do something with mobile. They're building up a huge mobile division, how to get their games on PC in a very short period of time, and they've done a good job so far. Microsoft is a little ahead of the game, and they're looking towards cloud, as they already have most of those other things kind of figured out as Sony continues developing it. Sony's doing a launcher not that far in the future also. There's no evidence to suggest that this deal would inhibit Sony or any other rival's ability to compete in the multi-game subscription or cloud gaming markets. The barriers to entry are low. The market is an extraordinarily dynamic, and new competition can arise throughout innovation and original content, all of which would be positive for consumers. Example, Fortnite. Ultimately, the CMA should continue its focused work on protecting consumers and not be dissuaded from facilitating the adoption towards subscription and cloud-based platforms in lieu of preserving the status quo that the market leaders have sought to maintain. The market leaders being Sony. Sony wants you buying physical copies of games. They want you buying their console. And Xbox is saying, play wherever you want. We want you to have tons of options about where you play. You can even play Call of Duty on PlayStation for all we care. You can play Minecraft on PlayStation. And that's sort of the future that we're moving towards. This video ended up being a lot longer than I expected, so I decided to break it into 2 parts. I like to kind of cap at 15 minutes because you lose viewer retention. So if you want to see part 2, it's available right now for all members, or it'll be posted tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell. We're going to go over closing arguments tomorrow. They really get the CMA in part 2 with regards to something later in the letter, and that was an especially juicy part. Thank you so much to the members for supporting this channel, by the way. I really appreciate you. If you want to become a member, you can click that join button right down there. And by the way, if you've been not keeping up with this case, I have this video you should check out right now, all about the CMA's worries. I made it a while back. You should check that one out, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye for now, everybody.